After a decade away from his home, Palestinian journalist and filmmaker Yousef Alhelou travelled back to Gaza to reconnect with the people and places of his childhood. His intention was to make a documentary film which would reveal the hidden beauties, joys and treasures of Gaza. The footage taken during his 2-month trip would become some of the final records of the cultural, social and recreational life of the besieged and blockaded enclave prior to its destruction by Israel following the Hamas atrocities on 7th of October 2023. We'll hear from Yousef shortly, but first, Phil Matthews from Amnesty Isle of Man. What has Amnesty been doing to raise awareness of the Gaza conflict?
Particularly in recent weeks, we decided to commence the Friday vigils every week after the ceasefire was broken back in March. But being an Amnesty group on the island, and we were well aware that most Amnesty groups around the British Isles had been holding weekly vigils for most part of the last 20 months. I've personally attended one in Bristol and one in Liverpool, and but we were aware that we hadn't been doing that. But if we go back just the last couple of years, I mean, first of all, way before that, the Amnesty group on the Isle of Man has drawn attention to the plight of the Palestinians on many occasions with campaigns over the years. Amnesty's been here for 33 years on the island now. It was founded in 92. And over the years, we've always taken part in Amnesty campaigns about Palestine. In fact, in 2022, our stall on Tynwald Day was all about Gaza. We were handing out watermelon to everybody on a very hot day. And that was because just that year, the last assault on Gaza had taken place, which killed 1,700 people. You know, just people keep saying it all started on October the 7th, 2023. But as I said, we chose that year as our theme. But the fact is, Amnesty wasn't actually in operation 2 years ago on the island. It was online, but we weren't meeting as a group. And I had stepped back from Amnesty. And what happened in the late months of 23, a group of mainly young, creative people on the Isle of Man, musicians, poets, artists, they came together and started to organise fundraising events to raise money for MAP, the Medical Aid for Palestine. I became aware of this, and they contacted me to speak at one of their demonstrations outside the Sefton. And they just naturally assumed I was speaking on behalf of Amnesty International. That's why they'd contacted me. So I went along to the first one and gave a speech, mainly on behalf of Amnesty. And I did it at the second one, and they came up to me and said, "Well, where's the Amnesty group? Where do you meet? Can we all get to?" And I said, "Well, it's not really operating." And I thought, I think it's about time. There's a demand here. Especially young people wanted to join in with a human rights organisation.
And why do you think people do? Because there are, I suppose there's mixed views as there are on most topics on the island. But some people will say, well, Gaza, Israel, the long distance away from us, why should it matter? And then others are deeply concerned about what they see and read in relation to the situation.
Well, personally, I can't see how anybody wouldn't be deeply concerned. But we do particularly notice it among the younger people and the older people. It's incredible the number of elderly people that have attended our events, support everything we do, and that's you notice this when you do public outreach and events like that. But it's natural. I mean, I was a teacher for many years on the island, and we had the opportunity to raise these issues, particularly in sixth form and general studies, and we even had Amnesty youth groups in 3 schools at one point. Had Amnesty International youth groups, and the people of that age do have a natural passion for what we call activism, to be honest. And we lose that a little bit because there's that age group between 18 and 23 that go off to university. So many of my ex-students and people I know, they've gone and joined these groups when they go away to university. We don't have that demographic here sometimes that does help with groups, environmental groups and human rights groups. But it seems very natural, but I would assume that it was quite natural to the reaction to what has happened in the last 20 months. I mean, how can anybody not be moved?
And yet, you've been calling for the Isle of Man government to make statements, and those statements haven't happened. And then you compare and contrast with Jersey's government, and Jersey does appear to be saying some of the things that you would hope Isle of Man government would say.
Well, I can categorically say that we're not always demanding statements all the time. We understand the role of our government, and we have stayed away from many causes that we could have raised with our government and our authorities here, that most amnesty groups do with their MPs in Britain. And it's a natural part of Amnesty's normal way of campaigning is you contact your MP. We did with this one in particular. First of all, that thing about relating to Jersey, I have been criticised before. We don't compare ourselves to Jersey. What is you can't say the Jersey does this, the Isle of Man should do this. The only time we and I ever raise Jersey is when there is the response that Crown dependencies, particularly in relation to the wider issue we've raised, which is about what we can speak out on and what we can do. I get quite frustrated when this response is given that we are not allowed to. It's part of our constitutional relationship. During a previous campaign, not this one, we found a couple of documents that we found out later half the MHKs weren't aware of these documents initially. The first one was May 2007, the framework for developing the international identity of the Isle of Man. It was more of a memorandum of understanding, I believe, but listen to this line that was in it. The Isle of Man has its own international identity and should speak out on international issues as a responsible, stable and mature democracy. When we drew attention to this, as you know, we had a lobbying campaign where we wrote to all members of Tynwald. Some of them did come back and say, well, I'm sorry, Phil, sorry, Amnesty, but that was superseded by another document in 2015. So it doesn't apply anymore. We've got that in writing, and it's called the Isle of Man Government International Relations Framework Document. And I thought, well, thank you for drawing my attention to it. So I read it, and on page 3 of it, it says that the framework from 2007 still applies. So the document they were referring to me to shut me up on that one, he said, yes, that still applies. And it was even more strongly worded. It actually says in that document, the UK encourages the Isle of Man to engage in the international agenda, to address global issues and find its own place in the global context. The ability to influence resulting decisions and outcomes has never been so essential. Now, to put it in a nutshell, I mean, I would always say, and again, this is looking at the wider issue here about this, we seek international recognition. One of the key aims of every programme of government has been to increase our profile in the international stage, etc. But that comes with international responsibilities as well. And later on in this conversation, I think we're going to get to the point where, are we not worried that if the UK is ignoring international law and the rulings of international bodies, it's one of a handful of countries that are doing so. 95% of the world understands that these atrocities are, well, we're using words now that we didn't use a year ago, which is genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. Are we willing to just carry on with our silence, not trying to distance ourselves at all from that potential historical look back at this, that the Isle of Man didn't take the opportunity? And that's where we bring Jersey in, because Jersey has done it. They have been proactive. Just 2 weeks ago, the Chief Minister made a simple statement. He's appalled at what is happening, and he stressed that his external relations team is making their views known vociferously to Westminster. We are back to the silence of Tynwald. We'll probably come on to that in a minute. But, you know, I mentioned the renewal of amnesty back at the start of last year, the one thing that we had the experience of doing, and I was able to offer Kurjeen Palestine, which is the name of the group of young people, I said, look, we have experience in lobbying Tynwald over the years. We can start looking at how to write to your political representatives and ask the right questions. And it took us months and months to get a response, which resulted in a motion put forward by Joni Farragher, and then she was absent, so it's Michelle Haywood that proposed it. But it took so long. And yet, the other thing about this speaking out that really was something that we felt was a very stark thing, that 2 days after the Hamas attack, the chief minister made a clear statement condemning it, quite rightly. But I don't think, it was on a Sunday, so I don't think he'd consulted with Tynwald members. I don't think he'd checked with the UK that it was right to say it. Of course it was right to say it, but it's a statement, just like the Chief Minister of Jersey is making a statement. It doesn't require debates and motions and Tynwald order paper. He made a statement a few weeks ago, again, quite rightly, when that driver crashed into the Liverpool. Immediately went on and made a statement about it. Nothing wrong with doing that. But there just seems to be this thing that we cannot say anything about what Israel's been doing for the last 20 months that we're all watching on television and staring us in the face.
If anything, you would think that making statements about situations that are occurring in the UK, would be less agreeable as far as the relationship between UK and Isle of Man governments than making statements about things happening in other parts of the world.
Yeah, because statements are made very quickly about events in the UK, which 24 hours later are proven to be slightly different nature.
So you've gone one step further than just holding vigils. You've now brought over Yousef, who has produced this wonderful film.
Yes, I mean, we do try to bring people to the islands. Yousef first got in contact with us a year ago originally, when he was campaigning with the Westminster for the resettlement scheme of Palestinian families and friends, similar to what we did with the Ukrainians. I decided at that point it wasn't. I did explain to him the experience we'd had with the Syrian refugee campaign and what we've done. I didn't want him to spend his time here when this was definitely a UK-focused campaign. But we kept in touch, and a couple of our other members have been in touch with him over the last year. And then he got in touch with me earlier this year to talk about the film that was being premiered in London in January. I had no idea he'd made this film as well. And I said, this is exactly what we'd like to bring you over here for. And I'm glad we got in very quickly, because in the space of just a few weeks, he was heavily in demand. Yeah. He was starting to win awards at independent film festivals. He was starting to get bookings all around the world, which he'll tell you about. And we managed to get this slot because we had to make sure TT was over. It's before he goes away again. He's got this slot for him to come over to present his film, and most importantly, to meet people on the Isle of Man, answer any questions at all, because people will say, I've not been to Gaza. There's somebody now coming here who's going to be able to answer everybody's questions about the situation there. Unfortunately, it's tinged with sadness because he has had a huge personal loss as well, of friends, family, and colleagues as a journalist. But we're still delighted to welcome him here, but I wish it was under different circumstances. And
Yousef, the film was made before the latest conflict really developed to the level it currently is. You were wanting to make a film about the positives about Gaza.
So thank you, Phil, for hosting us. I'm glad to be in the Isle of Man. I always wanted to visit. We journalists are the voice of the voiceless. We speak on behalf of our people, such as politicians who represent their own people. So I have a moral obligation to raise awareness, to report on the situation in Gaza. Let's call it, it's a genocide that has been running for the past 2 years, over 600 days plus. I thought there is a need to show the world how Gaza looked like, the vibrancy, the livelihood, and the hustle and bustle of life. Because millions around the world, including people from the Isle of Man, Manx, they did not have a chance to come and visit us in Gaza. So I went in the summer of 2023 in a purpose to film a documentary film to show the people around the world, my followers. I have over 1 million followers on Instagram, YouTube channel, Facebook, and so on, to show them how we managed to defy Israel's prolonged blockade and siege, how we managed the restrictions, how we beautified our prison. Gaza is the world's largest open-air prison. You have 2.5 million people live in 360 square kilometer, half size of the Isle of Man. You have around here 80,000 people. We have 2.5 million people in half of your island. So it's a journey that took me 2 months. After being away in London for 10 years, I managed to shoot and film the historical sites, the amusement parks, recreational places. I talked to people. I reconnected with my family, the city of my birth. I remembered my good memories when I was a child. And then 1 month later, after I went back to London, Israel genocidal war erupted. Then I thought I need to make it a universal documentary film. So I invested heavily in this documentary film, and it's my love letter to my city. I was the last person to document the beauty of Gaza in details, but what was meant to be a celebration of life in Gaza turned into eulogy. I lost loved ones. I lost my city. Gaza is part of historic Palestine. And Gaza is the world's largest open-air prison, and this prison has been transformed into an extermination camp. We don't have an airport or seaport, so the only way for us to travel into Gaza or out of Gaza is through Cairo. We have to land there and take a public transportation. I lost loved ones of my family members, my eldest sister Asma, and 7 of her children, my nephews and nieces, dozens of my cousins, relatives. I lost around 60 people from my family, relatives. Also over 200 journalist colleagues. Around 10,000 people, their bodies remain under the rubble, including my sister, and nephews and nieces. So I'm screening this film worldwide because I'm taking Gaza with me in my heart and mind and touring the world. This is beautiful Gaza that you never saw before. I managed to shoot rare footage from the air, and you will be shocked to see Gaza is beautiful to the extent that you would consider yourself in a Mediterranean resort in Italy or Spain. We have 45 kilometers on the Mediterranean Sea. It's a coastal city. That's why I like to go to islands. So I talk to people after the screenings, and we answer questions. I normally receive positive answers, but maybe some comments from those who disagree with our struggle for liberation and freedom. They say, how come you claim that you live in a big prison, but it looks beautiful? I said, yes, it's a big prison. It doesn't mean that at the time, it doesn't mean that you have to be starving, but now there is, of course, a man-made starvation. It's that the travel restrictions of movement of travel. We are not allowed to go to the West Bank. We are not allowed to go to visit holy places, even the Christians in Gaza. And by the way, 3 churches destroyed in Gaza. Christians. So this conflict is not only it's not a religious war between Jews and Muslims. It's a conflict over stolen land, over denied inalienable rights. So just to cut it short, Gaza has been transformed into an experimental field, a video game site, a hunger game site. It turns shatters my heart to see my people starved to this. My family, they cannot find a proper meal. They have to grind animal feed to make a flour. People are risking their lives. They are trading their lives just to go to be humiliated, dehumanized in cages to receive aid, and tens and hundreds of people lost their lives. They were shot like sitting ducks. There's so much suffering, so much destruction, and beautiful Gaza is destroyed, but it will rise again from the ashes. That's why I chose the title, The Phoenix of Gaza.
The obvious question for people who who don't live in your part of the world is, how do you actually resolve this? Because it seems that both sides claim that they want to live peaceful lives. Surely to goodness there must be a way in which this can be solved, where people can come together and understand each other and live alongside each other.
Of course, dialogue is the way forward, to resolve any issue. People tend to resist if they are colonized, if they are under occupation. Palestinians have tried all sorts of struggle, peaceful demonstrations. During the Gaza March of Return, hundreds of Palestinians were shot, killed, including paramedics and journalists. They were protesting peacefully along Gaza Israel security fence. It's not a border, because Israel has no defined borders. Israel is an expansionist state. So the only way forward is that Israel is simple: end the occupation of lands occupied in 1967, end the siege, allow Palestinians to rule themselves, because Gaza is still under Israeli occupation. Israel claims that it withdrew its forces in 2005, but as a matter of fact, it is still in full control of Gaza's airspace, territorial waters, and border crossings. So practically, it's the occupying power. As an occupying power, it has to look after the needs and welfare of the population under its occupation. That's why it makes life miserable, hard, destroying entire neighborhoods, ethnically cleanse the population so that people leave, because it is worried from the demographic growth. Gaza is a ticking bomb. 2.5 million people live in the southern part of Palestine. So the resolution to this conflict is simple. The Palestinian Authority, led by Arafat and Abbas at the time, now, they recognize Israel's right to exist, and they renounced the armed struggle. Israel has never recognized Palestinians' right to exist. They sabotaged any solution for a two-state solution. I think Israel knows that it can get away with what it is doing to Palestinians: atrocities, human rights violations. It has sabotaged the international system. It acts as a country above the international law. Many violations of UN resolutions. But in light of this, nonsense rejection to establish a Palestinian state, some Palestinians, including academics, they say, how about if we have one democratic, secular state for everybody, live in coexistence and harmony, regardless of race, ethnicity, color, background? Israel says no, it wants a Jewish state, because they say the land is too small. So when Palestinians or pro-Palestinians chant "Free Palestine from the river to the sea," what's meant, it's not to overthrow the Jewish people or to exterminate the Jewish people. No, not at all. We have no problem whatsoever with the Jewish people. We have Jewish people at the forefront of our marches across the world. What's meant by that is to have equal rights. Let's live together, enjoy equal rights with fair elections, one constitution under the law, and the majority rules. Israel says no, because they claim that this land is promised to them by God, and they are not willing to accept us to live in this part of the world, although we are the indigenous people of the land. Our towns and villages were wiped out, burned in 1948. About 500 towns and villages were wiped out, and at the time, almost to 1 million Palestinians, indigenous Palestinians, were kicked out, uprooted, and they become refugees worldwide. Now they account to 7 million in the diaspora, and about 7 million inside the occupied territories. So the Arab world also, they said they are willing to normalize ties with Israel if it agrees to commit itself to the international law, to the UN partitioning plan, and allow Palestinians to have a state. Netanyahu brags, said he will not allow a state. He is enslaved. He's controlled by his right-wing fanatics, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and the UK government said many times, Israel has to respect international law. It has to accept the Palestinian state. We know this lip service. There is no pressure. There is no real pressure on Israel to abide by international law. We see, the whole world see that Israel kills civilians, children, starve people to death, collectively punishing the population under different slogans, as if history started on that day, as if Israel only is allowed to defend itself, while Palestinians under a crippling siege and brutal occupation for 7 decades, they have no right to defend themselves. So there is so much grievances, so much suffering. Palestinians refused to vanish, and they will not raise the white flag. Resistance is an idea. Even if Hamas is uprooted, you will have secular atheist resistance. So
the Hamas atrocities, though, that took place, I mean, you can't deny that those were very clearly a provocation to Israel. And if you were in Israel's position, if you were a member of the Israeli government, you would have to react to that, wouldn't you?
that day was a sad day. It was only one day. Now, Israel's genocide in Gaza is over 600 days of genocide. Of course, killing of civilians is wrong. It must not happen. Targeting children must not happen. But you cannot punish an entire population because you have an issue with Hamas. And are you telling me that on that day, Israel did not know about that attack for 6 hours? Where were they? Why didn't Israel defend itself on that day? Why they let it happen? They had the intelligence, but they refused to intervene because they wanted an excuse to uproot Gaza, level it to the ground. Because, as I say, the ultimate goal, they knew that some captives would be taken captives, because we have also Palestinian hostages in Israeli jails. Over 300 children, women held without a charge or trial, in addition to 12,000 Palestinian political prisoners. Why? Because they resist Israel's occupation. Now, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So Israel wanted an excuse to get rid of the Palestinians because it does not want to be responsible for the needs and welfare of 2.5 million people. It says the land is too small. So the collective punishment that Israel is doing aims to make Palestinians revolt against Palestinian resistance. And again, Hamas can be uprooted, but you will have more resistance because Israel has orphaned around 40,000 kids, and those kids will grow up one day and pick up arms.
There'll be quite a, there'll be quite a few people listening to this program whose only real understanding and interest, and it's very sad to have to say this, but generally speaking, people's interest, people in this part of the world's interest is what harm is this causing me, and the harm that they see and experience, sadly, is Islamic terrorism. They'll be looking, some people at least will be looking and thinking, well, finally someone is standing up to this and trying to put a stop to it. Can you see perhaps that it's difficult to win friends if parts of the Islamic it's not a movement, is it? But the parts of the peoples that you represent are encouraging atrocities to take place around the world, and then that makes it difficult for people to be as sympathetic as they might be.
I disagree that you use Islamic terrorism. Would you dare say Jewish terrorism or a Christian terrorism? You need to use your terms correctly.
Yeah.
People resist under Israeli colonialism until they gain their liberation. The Irish people, IRA, were considered terrorist organizations, but yet when they sat down with the UK government, they signed an agreement, they became peace dogs. Nelson Mandela was on the US terrorist list for a long time, and now we have got a statue of Nelson Mandela in Times Square. And as I said again, why the whole world doesn't consider Palestinians as human beings? Why Israel plays the victim each time? Why I have to suffer and become a refugee in Gaza, whereas I was supposed to be living in historic Palestine, and I attended United Nations schools. As I said, Israel justifies its attacks against the Palestinian people. Now there are some Jewish voices, Israelis, who disagree with what Israel is doing. Israel provokes Palestinians. Israel's war in Gaza in 2008, 2012, 14, they were unprovoked. History didn't start on that day. Vietnam got its liberation through resistance. So Ukrainian resistance was supported. Why there's international hypocrisy and double standards? Is that because we are not white? Is that because Israel enjoys Zionist lobby in the United States and in the United Kingdom? Why is Israel so special?
And that is a very good question. Phil, you were trying to come in.
A couple of things in the last two issues you were just discussing. I mean, just going back a little bit to immediately there was an example that I understand people's perception, the majority of people. I mean, you look at the media in our part of the world and where you get your information from, but immediately there was this focus just a few minutes ago about what happened on October the 7th. But Yousef just mentioned that those successive years, you know, I was shocked to hear a phrase the other day that I'd not heard before, but every 2 or 3 years, Israel made incursions into Gaza, the place it's supposed to be responsible for. And on each occasion, it killed far more people, women and children, than, I'm not saying it's right, than what happened on that day. But they have I was going to say, the phrase is called mowing the lawn. That is how they described the killing of civilians, just to remind them every now and then, we can come in and we can kill a load of you. So that's something, you know, that every few years since Gaza was allegedly allowed to look after itself. But going back earlier on when you said about resolving the issue, you know, well, what's the I mean, what's happened in the last year particularly, it has become so apparent now to almost everybody that there is no way Israel, in conjunction with America and the UK, wants it to be resolved. They've made it quite clear. There are all the organisations that are the opportunity or the potential avenue for resolving it are being ignored, or even by Israel told that they need to end. The UN, the World Health Organization, the ICJ, the ICC. We've just had America on its own veto 4 or 5 Security Council resolutions, which would have been the start. We have in a few days' time, we have a meeting of nations where potentially up till a few days ago, Canada, France and the UK were prepared to recognise the State of Israel and join the other 152 nations that already do. America put the pressure on, and now, we haven't heard from Macron yet, but the UK and Canada said, oh, we might not do that now in a couple of days' time. We'll say there's qualifications. Other things have to be achieved first. So back again, we're seeing them working together. It's outside. The worst thing of all is to talk about them against them, you know, the two bodies. It's the outside, the outside agencies and governments and interests and corporations as well that have a vested interest in Israel having more control over the area. You know, dare I mention the resources that are there, the gas fields under Gaza and water, the oil fields in the West Bank. You know, we go back to so many conflicts we know about, including Ukraine, about what resources are there under the ground, how many billions are there to be exploited. So it's us again interfering, and as we say, it's the colonialism, neo-colonialism now again. Yeah.
And Yousef, I mean, many people will have seen the destruction, what can be reported of the destruction in Gaza at the moment. What would they have seen if they'd have gone to Gaza when you were making your film? What are the? Because you know, I'm largely unaware of the beauty that you talk about, the cultural assets, the heritage, the historic buildings. What was there?
Yeah. So what they were expecting to see, the Riviera of the Middle East. They would see resorts. They would see hotels, cafes, a lovely beach. They would see sociable life. They would see people celebrating their wedding parties. They would see markets, historical places, recreational sites, farms, Gaza seaport. They would see really nice projects, reconstruction projects. They would see the coastal Al-Rashid Road. They would see also the poor areas, Jaiya, Jabalia. They will see how densely Gaza was. They would see Gaza is a prison, but Palestinians managed to beautify their prison. But also they will find out why Palestinians resort to armed struggle, because they are confined in a small piece of land under siege. 2/3 of the population are refugees. Israel killed their parents, and those young people, they have this sense of reprisal. They would see a young population. Half of Gaza's 2.5 million people are young population. They would see how hospitable, how generous the people of Gaza are. They would see that Gazans have aspirations, dreams. They would see how creative, how innovative the people of Gaza, despite living in a prison. This is what they were expecting to see. Now, the destruction, of course, they would see how colorful Gaza was. Now, the contrast, it's a gray, bleak future, suffering, sewage fills the streets, garbage, destruction, debris, dusty air, drones, Apaches. It's the world's largest cemetery for children. It's the world's. I mean, the bombs that were dropped in Gaza is equivalent to some, according to some experts, to 5 nuclear or atomic bombs, because Israel received shipments from around the world, and one of the requests from people to their governments is to stop shipping weapons to Israel through UK airports. The UK sends reconnaissance drones to gather information to help their Israeli counterparts. But now, of course, there are so many millions around the world also they are protesting. They would like to march peacefully to Gaza from the sea. We know that Madeleine boat was intercepted in international waters against their will. Also, this highlights Israel's naval blockade that has been imposed on Gaza since 1967. So people in Gaza, 45 kilometers in the Mediterranean, we are not allowed to sail to the world. Also on the land, to go to the West Bank, you have to go through bureaucracy, checkpoints. There are some people in Gaza, they have never been in a plane or a train. People are denied the basics. Water now, there is no water. It's contaminated. The sea is contaminated. There's no electricity, no food. Everything goes in, goes out, is controlled by the Israelis. Israel controls our birth registry. They control the frequency, the air. The situation is so miserable, so that people lose hope, and so that they can unilaterally leave. But leave where? There is no access point. There is no safe place.
The Israeli government says that if Hamas basically disarm and leave Gaza and release the hostages, then the hostilities will end. That seems like a relatively straightforward solution.
So everybody knows that Israel killed many of its hostages, and Netanyahu is not interested in the releasing the hostages because many deals were on the table during even Biden, and he turned away all these deals. Hamas said many times, I don't represent them, I'm not a friend of them. They said many times they are willing to release all captives, but they need one assurances, they need one guarantee that Netanyahu would stop the genocide and withdraw his forces and allow the reconstruction of Gaza. Israel, Netanyahu, says no, we need to have a free will to conduct incursions, invasions, and kill you and do whatever we want. The captives are the only remaining leverage card in Hamas's hands. That's why they are reluctant to release them at once. The U.S. administration for Palestinians has never been an honest peace broker. Of course, not all people to support Hamas. Hamas won the elections in 2006, but you cannot punish an entire population because you have an issue with Hamas. This is not how things are supposed to be resolved. There are, the negotiation table. There are no intervention from the Arab world, from the Islamic world. The international community has been watching us slaughtered for the past, 600 days. So the world is watching this genocide, live streamed, 4K, into our mobile phones, smartphones, doing little to help. So people have lost hope. People say, you know what? We have nothing to lose.
And I guess even if Hamas gave up its arms and left, the people left behind would presume. Well, I'm guessing. I'm trying to imagine a situation where an invading force came to the Isle of Man, wreaked that level of destruction, and said this particular group of people have to leave.
People would disagree.
I guess I would probably be
in the past,
incensed to want to resist that even if whatever group that was deemed to be the problem had left, then a new group presumably would come in and replace them.
Even if the Hamas leadership now, I don't know how many of them agreed to leave, the idea will continue evolving. Those young people who lost their parents, they will not abandon the right to defend themselves or to resist or to seek revenge. And also talking about the weapons of Hamas, they do not have cannons, tanks, planes. They have light weapons, Kalashnikovs. I mean, Israel tries to magnify the capabilities of Hamas as if it's a state. It's not a state. Israel is a super power country, holds nuclear weapons and heads, attacking defenseless civilian population for 75 years. And they try all the time to justify their attacks. I think they are annoyed from the insistence of Palestinians to seek liberation. They are jealous from the resolve and resilience and steadfastness of Palestinians to disappear and go to the museum. That's why they dehumanize Palestinians and to demonize Palestinians. All the time they provoke Palestinians. But again, talking about freedom fighters, I've learned that you had freedom fighters here in the Isle of Man resisting the invaders. So why some concepts are applied to non-Palestinians, where Palestinians, they have no right to claim that they have the right to resist?
I do want to add something to that, because first of all, that thing about Hamas releasing the hostages. I mean, can we just go back just a few months to March? The second phase of the ceasefire was a continued phasing of release of hostages. But in the second phase, Israel had to make some concessions as well. That's the point when Netanyahu said, right, forget the ceasefire. You know,
He broke it.
He broke it. It's pretty obvious that. But I just want to add something about the film, because I've seen the film. Other things that were in the film that are just that Yousef didn't mention. I mean, it's the fact that the beautiful place you see in the film, they were still having to create that place with incredible heart. They were rebuilt. They'd been rebuilding it regularly after the previous attacks and demolitions of buildings. They've rebuilt it several times, but also still had constant power cuts, then controlled by the Israelis and cutting off of water. Fishermen, in the film, you see the fishermen going out and then being fired at by Israeli gunboats. This is before then. There was a lot of help from outside. Again, UNRWA, for example, and the other organisations that Israel's got rid of, the UN. But you had 600 lorries going in every day before October the 3rd with enough food, aid, medicine help to complement what they were already growing and producing within Gaza itself. So an awful lot of help from the rest of the world. And that was the situation before then. But to see the freedom of women there, to see the different religious communities living in peace with each other, to see the Commonwealth war graves tended by Palestinians for 70, 80 years, the Commonwealth war, which were then bombed, and then Israel bombed them and dug them up, saying, "Oh, there's Hamas underneath the cemetery." You know, our Commonwealth war graves. The Palestinians looked after them. So there's lots of things that both of us have not mentioned that are in the film as well.
And Yousef, I mean, one of the things you said earlier, which certainly intrigues me, is that Palestinians would be willing to live in a secular single state alongside the Israeli people. I mean, is that still a possibility, or has that kind of disappeared now?
You see, maybe it was possible before this genocide. Maybe Palestinians would never forget or forgive what Israel is doing to them. The Israelis, they look at us as numbers, as collateral damage. They don't consider us as human beings. We are cursed in their religion. And when you have people brainwashed, indoctrinated, I think it could be a little bit hard to live next to them. But there's hope. If leaders in Israel agree that what it is doing to Palestinians will backfire, it will harm Israelis, it will increase the anti-Semitism, I think they have to realize that they will never be able to feel secure as long as they occupy other people's lands, as long as they enjoy impunity. Attacking a sovereign country, Iran today, for example, flagrant violation of international law. Israel enjoys a green light. They have never been held accountable. Netanyahu is wanted by the international ICJ. He's a free man now. Where are the slogans and concepts of human rights and democracy? Why it's not applied to Israelis? Is that because the U.S. administration backs Israel? So to have one state, like in the UK, for example, you have different religions, different sects, different orientation, different colors. People live under one law. They respect the law, the constitution, and there is a free elections. This could happen. It could take time for people to forget the sadness, the anger, the frustration, because if somebody kills, God forbid, your children, you would seek revenge. You would never forget. This is also deeply rooted in Palestinians' collective conscience. Now we are facing the second Nakba, the catastrophe of 1948, and the duration of my film is 48 minutes because I want to remind the world that our problem started in 1948. Actually, it started in 1917 when Great Britain, Prime Minister at the time, Balfour, he promised our land to the Jewish people in Palestine at our expense. The Palestinian people were never responsible for the Holocaust, yet we are paying a heavy price. The Israelis, they should be the most merciful people on earth because they experience oppression and persecution and injustice, yet they are treating us very badly. This has to change.
We, and sadly we are coming towards the end of the programme now, but we in this part of the world know of a particularly tragic situation, a conflict that had been going on for the best part of at least 2 centuries, possibly even more, and ultimately that was resolved by people being prepared to come together, to sit around the table, to talk to each other, and to commit to a peaceful future. And of course that's the situation in Northern Ireland. I mean, there are still tensions there, but compared with where we were, it feels like a much more peaceful situation. And people, whilst I wouldn't say they necessarily get on, both the different communities, that there are still tensions. They live reasonably peacefully.
Well, Yousef has just done a big tour of Ireland with many, many venues for your film screening, and you met so many people from that country.
That's right. I mean, the Irish people, they said they fought British colonialism for 800 years, and they say Chuka Arla, and we say our day will come. I know the people is sickened, disgusted from this oppression, injustice. They watch us, it's actually new modern colonialism and slavery, because you cannot. I mean, I don't like the idea that some people consider themselves better than other people. Why? We should be equal human beings. I mean, nobody can claim that they are God's chosen people, that this land is promised to you. What about if we Palestinians were actually Jewish 2,000 years ago, and we converted and became Christians and Muslims? So how can you prove that this land is promised to you by God? And you cannot be a secular Zionist and you claim to be a religious, that this land promised to you by God. It's the international community has to play a major role to pressure Israel by sanctioning Israel to abide by international law, to end this occupation, colonization, oppression, and allow Palestinians to have their own independent state. Again, Israel, the Middle East, and the whole world will never be stable as long as there is injustice in Palestine, because Palestine inspires the whole world. It inspires rebellions around the world. It inspires those who fight for liberation and equal rights and so on. It actually inspires Islamic movements, because Muslims around the world, they would like to have the right to visit Al-Aqsa compound, Islam's third holiest site. We Palestinians in Gaza are not allowed to visit the holy site of Al-Aqsa, Jerusalem, and Quds, and Christians are not allowed to. So there is constriction. There are some restrictions on the movement of movement, and we must be free. And the freedom of the people of the Isle of Man is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people.
And very, very quick answer to this one, because we are just about out of time. How hopeful are you that you will live to see a peaceful solution to all this?
I am very hopeful that what Israel is doing is actually going to signal the collapse of the Zionist state, because they refuse to live in harmony and coexistence with the region. They refuse to be part of the region. They refused many concessions from the Palestinian people. They refused many offers offered to them by the Arab world, because they cannot maintain their occupation. They rely on America, and they must, take the chance before it's too late, because they have shot themselves not in the foot, in the head. So many Jewish people migrate abroad. They leave Israel. There is reverse migration. Tourism is declining in Israel because the world is sickened and shocked. Israel, the only democracy in the world, the Middle East, the only competent army in the world that excels at killing Palestinian children, destroying mosques, hospitals. There's no education in Gaza for 2 years. They destroyed everything. What's this to do with self-defense?
That was Palestinian journalist and filmmaker Yousef Alhelou and Phil Matthews from Amnesty Isle of Man. What do you think? Can the answer to the destructive conflict in Gaza really be more conflict? Does the world feel any safer as a result of the conflict? And can we really be innocent bystanders as we watch the death and devastation in the area? I'm Phil Gaughan. Thanks for listening.